Welcome to constructing the front and back video. We are going to start with both of our pocket panels and both of our pocket liner pieces. And what we're going to do first is find the center of the bottom edge of all four pieces. So I'm just going to fold these in half and then snip a little notch in the center so that you can see where center is on each of the pieces. Now, when constructing the front and the back, this section you are going to be doing each of these steps twice because the front and the back of the bag are constructed exactly the same. So when the instructions in the pattern say to do something, you'll be doing it 2 times. All right, I have found the center of the bottom edge of all 4 pieces, and now what I'm going to do is take one of my pocket liners, and I'm going to align the bottom edge. The center marks are going to line up, and the bottom edge is going to line up, and I'm going to clip these in place, just like that. And I'm also going to make sure that the curve at the top of the panel also lines up. Just going to adjust my clips a little bit, and I'm going to clip that in place as well. And I'm going to repeat that on the other panel. Okay, so first we are going to stitch this top edge at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and we're just going to start right at the edge of the pocket liner piece right here. Don't go past onto the pocket panel. Start here, stitch across around the curve and across again, and end your stitches right here where the other side of the pocket liner is. Again, don't go onto the pocket panel. Okay, I'm going to back stitch at the beginning, and then I'm going to start stitching, and then once I hit that curve, I'm going to pivot and then curve around. Okay, curve around again until I get about a 1/2 inch away from the top, and then I'm going to pivot again and go across the top. And I'm going to stop with my needle down right at the edge of the pocket liner and then back stitch. Okay, you can see my stitching here, and now next I'm going to trim away the seam allowance with pinking shears. If you don't have pinking shears, you can just cut notches here with regular scissors. But using pinking shears definitely helps ease this curve once you turn the pocket liner to the back. And I'm going to repeat that on the other pocket panel. All right, I'm going to remove the clips from the bottom here, and I'm going to flip the liner panel up, and I like to just use my fingers to kind of press that curve before I make the liner panel go wrong sides together with the pocket panel. And I'm going to clip this top edge and just kind of roll the seam in my fingers to get that open as much as possible. And I'm going to reach down in behind here and poke out this top corner. Just kind of work it until it's as open as possible, just like that, and clip it in place. Okay, do the other side. Reach back here, and using my finger, I'm just going to poke out this corner. And roll the seam a little bit in my fingers to open it up and clip it in place. So next on the wrong side, you're going to look and make sure that your pocket liner lines up with the bottom edge of your pocket panel still, and my center mark is also lined up. And I'm just going to give that a quick clip so nothing shifts, just like that. And next is a very important step. Just take your scissors, and right next to the pocket liner, you're going to see this top fold of the seam allowance, and I'm just going to clip into it just like that so that it sticks up now instead of folds over. So right next to the edge of the pocket liner, I just clipped right into the seam, and I'm going to show you that one more time on this side. I'm just going to stick my scissors right underneath that seam allowance and clip all the way up until it sticks straight up instead of folds over. You can see that there. That way you can see from the right side, you can see where the pocket liner ends. So you can kind of visualize the edges of the pocket liner, because we are going to top stitch this top edge, but we're going to start and stop right where these notches are. So I'm going to start with my needle down right here where this notch is sticking up, and I'm going to top stitch this top edge, and I'm going to stop right here where this other notch is sticking up. And again, I'm going to repeat that on the other panel as well. All right, I am going to put my needle down right where that notch is, and about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of the pocket, I am going to start top stitching. And it is okay to back stitch here, but just a couple of stitches. Don't go too far before back stitching. And then just take it slow so you can go around this curve smoothly. All right, and I'm approaching the other notch, so I'm just going to stop with my needle down right where that notch is, and I'm going to back stitch just a couple stitches. And I'll show you what that looks like. All right, here you can see that notch, that seam allowance that we trimmed, and then I started my stitches right where that notch is and back stitched a couple times and went all the way across the top curve of the pocket and stopped on the other side right where that notch is as well. So from the back side, you can see that that means I didn't go past the edge of the pocket liner at all. I stopped right where the pocket liner ends. So again, repeat that on the other panel. For the next step, we are going to retrieve our main panel, and we're going to put these two pieces right sides together, and we're going to line up the bottom edge of this kind of wing on the main panel. We're going to line up this bottom straight edge with this top unsewn edge of the pocket panel. So the right side of the main panel gets right sides together with the pocket panel. And I'm going to just turn this around here. And we're going to line up the top of the pocket panel with the bottom edge of the main panel. And I'm going to clip that in place. But I'm going to turn my clips upside down because we are going to be stitching this from the other side. Okay. So the side edges should align right here on both sides, and then when you flip this over, you'll be able to see the pocket liner is facing up, and we're going to stitch along this edge here and this edge here at our 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, back stitching at the beginning. And then stitch all the way until you get to the pocket liner, but don't stitch onto the pocket liner. So my needle just went down next to the liner and then I back stitched. And I'm going to lift and trim those threads. And then I'm going to repeat that on this side as well, just putting my needle down right where the pocket liner edge is. And then since I don't want to back stitch onto the pocket liner, I'm going to go forward a couple stitches and then backwards a couple stitches, and then forward until the edge of the panel. And then back stitch here as well. All right, both sides have now been sewn. And so we are now going to flip this right sides up. So both of the right sides of the pocket panel and the main panel are facing up. And you can see that they are attached now on the sides. And we are now going to top stitch the rest of this top edge. The top of the pocket is already top stitched. And now we need to complete it all the way to the edge of the panel. So with the seam allowance pointing down, you're going to top stitch through the pocket panel and the seam allowance right along this edge, starting at the side, and you're going to stop with your needle down right where the top stitching begins from the pocket top stitching, and then back stitch a small amount right here, just 1 or 2 stitches here. Back stitch at the beginning, and then top stitch all the way until you hit the first stitch of the pocket top stitching, and then I'm going to just back stitch 1 and go forward again. So as you can see here, I stitched all the way until we hit that top stitching there. And then I back stitched only a couple of stitches, just 1 or 2 stitches here. And now it looks like one continuous line. Once we add our handle connectors to the panel, this point where we have our back stitching is going to be covered by the handle connector. So that's why you want to keep it a very short, just 1 or 2 stitches for the back stitching here, because then it will be small enough to be hidden by your 1-inch handle connector that is going to be stitched right here. And so we're going to do the same thing on this side. And I'm going to start with my needle down right in the spot where I ended my top stitching from the pocket. And I'm going to go forward 1 and then backwards 1. And then go forward all the way until I hit the edge of the panel. And trim my threads, and now it looks like I have one long continuous top stitching all the way across the panel, and repeat this with the other panel as well. Okay, both panels are now top stitched along the sides, so what we are going to do next is flip up the pocket panel, and you'll notice that the bottom of the main panel and the pocket liner should align roughly with each other along the bottom and the side edges. So what we're going to do now is flip up the pocket panel and measure 1 inch up from the bottom of the pocket liner. And we're going to make a mark across the entire width of the pocket liner that is 1 inch above the bottom edge. Okay, just like that. And next I'm going to grab a couple clips, and I am going to clip the bottom so that the pocket liner and the main panel are now clipped together. And then I'm going to flip up the rest of the pocket panel and clip the sides as well. So while the pocket panel is flipped up, I am going to go in with my machine and I'm going to sew down the edge of the pocket panel. And this time I'm going to sew at about 1/4 inch seam allowance. It is okay to estimate right here, but I find that the smaller the seam allowance, the bigger your pocket is, and therefore the more use you can get out of your pocket. So I would do about 1/4 inch seam allowance here. And once you approach the line that you just drew, stop with your needle down and pivot so that you're sewing across the line, and then get to the other side and sew all the way up to the top. Make sure that when you're starting your stitch here and you're ending your stitch here, that you don't catch any of the pocket panel in under your needle. You're going to want to keep that out of this next seam. I'm gonna back stitch at the top and go all the way down the side. And once I approach this line, I'm going to stop with my needle down, pivot, and then sew across the line. Okay, I'm going to stop at the edge here, pivot again, and sew up the other side. And make sure that when you start approaching this edge, that everything just remains flat and nothing is getting bunched up, because everything is kind of at an angle right now, and so you don't want it to be bunched up in any certain area, because that will cause it not to lay flat when you're done. So your pocket is now closed up, and we are going to trim away the bottom of this pocket close to the stitching that we made at the bottom. And that will make it so that this bottom of the pocket stays out of the seam allowance when you go to sew the base onto the bag. You can keep any of the bulk out of the seam allowance. So I'm going to repeat that on the other panel.